Hey, what's up everybody? Mike Meyer here from Mike Meyer Incorporated. Today I want to show you a little cool, I'm going to call it a dingus. It's actually a bearing spacer. It's from DRP, and this thing can really help us with our brakes. It does help us with our brakes. It helps us with the feel. It's a circle track little thing that helps us, that helps circle track racers keep their bearings from getting over tightened. But what we found with them is that if the old school way of setting up your front hubs and bearings is just to put your nut on, tighten it down, wedge these two bearings in together, squeeze the hub, not too much because you don't want to build heat. And that's the old school way of setting bearings. The problem with that is just by putting a nut on, squeezing it down, the actual hub still moves and floats around, and it pushes back the pads and the caliper. And so when you step on the brakes, you got to backfill those pads back to the rotor with your pedal, your brake pedal. You step on it and you lift up again and you step on it. Now you got a firm pedal. A lot of us for years thought that was air in the brake lines. But what it really was, it's the bearings floating and moving around with load on them. So if we take this cool little spacer, which is adjustable, and put it between the bearings, what it does, we can set the depth, the length of it, because it's a little different for every bearing pack. We can set the depth and we can torque down the nut now. We don't have to worry about just squeezing it, and it keeps these bearings, the relationship between the two, solid and firm without over tightening the bearings. And it gives us, it gets rid of a ton of that movement, which gets rid of that knockback in the pad, which makes the brake pedal feel a lot better. So these little DRP spacers are rad. So I'll show you how to put these guys in. Take a look. All right, so here we go. I'm gonna go ahead and set this guy up and follow along. The DRP spacer has a little set screw, so we wanna make sure this guy's backed out. When we go to set this, we don't want any grease in our bearings. We want them nice and dry. This has a little bit of grease, but that's all right. And so I'll put the large bearing on first, okay? Then I'm literally just gonna pick a spot for this guy. I'm gonna slide this on, and then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and put my rotor on. I don't have a seal on there or anything yet, it's all dry. And then what I'm gonna do is that guy went away. I'm gonna go ahead and get this on. It's gonna take just a second to do all this. I put the nut down by the phone. All right. I'll tighten this guy down, and I'm gonna do a couple of things here so I can get a good idea. There's multiple different ways of doing this. You can do it with dial indicators and all sorts of stuff, but over time I've figured out this is a simple, easy way of doing it. So right now, I made that bearing spacer too long on purpose. I can sit there, and this is what I tell people when they come in the shop and I have them on our display, work with this. I want you guys to, maybe the first time, make that spacer too long, and you can literally feel, if you go back and forth a couple of times, you can feel the nut stop. Normally, when you're tightening bearings, when you go to tighten it with no spacer in there, you'll feel the nut slow down and it's squeezing the bearings. There's nothing positive that nut's locking down on. So right now it goes nut, inner bearing race, DRP spacer, inner bearing race, and then the shoulder of the spindle. It's a positive, boom, 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 it's locked down. So make sure, probably the first time, what I like to do, make it too long and feel that positive lock, and just go back and forth a couple times. Get the feel of it. It sounds funny when I'm showing customers to do this in the display. They first think I'm a little bit whack by making them, feel that locking feel of the socket. Then after a while they'll go, oh, okay, I get it. So I know it's too long. I'm gonna come back, and I'm going to take this spacer. I'm probably going to go 1 turn, 2 turns. I'm gonna see if I can make this guy too short now, but it's gonna take a few shots. So let's see here. Okay, gonna have to bear with me. All right. All right. Ooh, that feels like it's too short now. Because what I did was, see, I can just keep moving it. It doesn't have that positive lock. It's got like a squeeze to it. So, see that right there? It's got tight to it. I can squeeze it some more. See right there, if I left it like that, in just a little bit, you burn your bearings up, and that spacer's not really doing anything. So I went back and forth, I felt it. Again, do that a couple times, get the feel. You can just see how the wrench kind of, it gets tight, but it doesn't go dunk and get locked down. So, there you go. Okay, so now I know that's a little too short, right? When I first started doing this, I definitely had all the dial indicators out, and I was trying to get the amount of preload that's recommended, and then I kind of started figuring this little process out. Okay, so I went in 2 turns. I counted that. So I'm going to go back 1 turn. 1/2, that's 1 turn. So let's see what that puts us at, okay? Let's see here. And we'll get down to 1/8 inch or 1/8 turns. So I just did 2 turns in, I did 1 turn out. We'll go back and forth and we'll finally get down to about 1/8 of a turn. Oh, that locked down. I can't, see how I can't like keep squeezing it like before? And I can move it back and forth. And you hear that? That dunk, 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 dunk. It's still loose. Okay, there's no load on those bearings. Okay. We're really close, actually. If we had grease in the bearings, you wouldn't be able to hear that bunk, 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 bunk back and forth. Oh, there it goes. All right, let's do this again. So I think I'm pretty close. So I went in 2 turns the first time. I went out 1 turn. So now I'm just gonna give it, we're pretty close. I'm gonna give it a 1/4 turn. I went a 1/4 turn in because it was a little loose. All right, let's do this again. All right. Yeah, it's really important to be able to feel that wrench, right? Oh, there's some snug, I think, right there, because that's not so bad. Watch this. Let's see what this looks like. That's pretty close. I'm actually, see, I can't go any further. So I can tell it's locked down. And the old school thing was what? 1.5 turns of revolution. That's 2.5 turns. Kind of thinking that looks pretty good. The big thing is, when you're starting out, purposefully make that spacer too long, okay? Then purposely make it too short. Feel what both of those feel like in the wrench, you know? That's a solid positive lock. The other one's like it's kind of squishy and rubbery feeling. So then you can tell if you're squeezing it. Also watch the rotor. If it spins and it just goes like that much, you know, like a half a turn, you feel a lot of drag in it, you're squeezing those bearings. If you spin it and that butter just goes forever, you don't have any pinch on anything, and you could probably grab the rotor, feel it's loose. That's not gonna fly either. You wanna be able to put 50 pounds of torque on this, 60 pounds of torque, no problem, and not have it dragging a bunch, right? So this is the whole idea. You wanna be able to lock down those bearings, have torque on this nut, and then, but not over tighten the bearings. And that'll keep this whole hub assembly from moving, so you have good positive brake feel, and then you can dial in your master cylinder that much closer. So what I'm gonna do now, I'll pull this guy back out. I know that this one's set. There's a little Allen. You can put a little blue Loctite on it. Be sure not to move this because you set that. You can take a little white pen and mark it. And I'm just gonna I'll put a little blue Loctite on there in a minute. I'll put it in, and then I'm gonna pull these bearings apart now. I'll grease them, I'll put the seal in, and when I go to put this all back together, I'll flip this rotor on its face, like so. I'm gonna drop this guy in, I'll drop the greased bearing in, I'll put the seal on, then I'll put the whole assembly together like that. But that's about it. It's pretty straightforward. You don't wanna over tighten it, you don't want it too loose, you wanna be able to feel which one's which. And then after, say, 100 miles, go back in, double check. Make sure, you know, after you've driven the car, these seals are pretty cheap. So if you gotta pop one out and reset it, absolutely cool. But this is a great addition to your brake system, to the way the car rolls. It's just gonna help these bearings last forever. Good stuff.